Good morning. Today is Thursday, October the 25th, and this is The Drill. And thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. So a lot of people might be asking, what difference does it make, Ron? What bloody difference does it make how you define conservative? Why is it that we need to have everybody be defining conservative in the same way? And why is it, anyways, that your way is the right way and everyone else is wrong? And why can't I go ahead and define it as the way I stand on issues such as abortion and the environment, etc., and you can decide that it is about where people stand on change? Simple. Did you realize that if you're going to go ahead and say, hey, I'm a conservative because where I stand on issues, that you are allied with the Ku Klux Klan? Did you realize that? Because you see, the Ku Klux Klan defines themselves as being conservative, ultra conservative perhaps, based on where they stand on the issues. So guess what? Your brother, your fellow traveler, so to speak, is some guy that wears a white sheet. Do you want to have to explain that? Do you want to have to walk around life trying to explain to people that, well, no, but yes, I'm a conservative, but no, I don't have anything to do with the KKK. Do you want to have to do that? No, of course you don't. And it's not true anyways. And the reason we know it's not true is because the KKK doesn't make the presumption for the status quo. Making the presumption for the status quo is saying, you know what? The country, for the most part, is pretty damn good the way it is. It doesn't need any fundamental reforms. It doesn't need, a little changing here and there, right? We got some corrupt areas. We should get rid of the public employee unions because those are corrupt, that kind of thing. But by and large, we don't need some whole-scale revolution. Does that sound like the KKK to you? Do you think the KKK is happy with the way things are? Do you think the KKK is happy with the Civil Rights Act of 1964? Of course not. The KKK wants a revolution just as much as the Socialist Party. Why? Because they're left. Because they make the presumption for change. They look around the United States and says, boy, this place sucks. This country really sucks. Look at all this racial equality. This is BS. We can't have this. We need a revolution. We need to fundamentally change this country so that we have a paradise, a racial paradise. All white people, we will chase all the non-whites out of the country and leave this country to the white folks. Okay? They make the presumption for change. That's what distinguishes, that's how you know that the KKK is left and that you're not. Okay? Essences matter. The reason I say making the presumption for the status quo is so important is because that is the essence of being a conservative. All the rest of it is just fluff. It's non-essentials. What your opinion is about abortion or not abortion or whatever is not essential. The essential thing is that you make the presumption for the status quo. That you say to people that come along and say, hey, why not marijuana? You should say, why? Why? Why should we legalize dope for recreational purposes? Why? Why should we do that? Hey, let's build structures for homeless people. Why? Okay. Let's change the way we or in California, they had bills about putting people out of prison, getting them out early, people that are not convicted of violent felonies should get out and get out early. Why? Why should we do that? Okay, that's making the presumption for the status quo. Simply asking why and standing your ground, not allowing the left to trick you into proving a negative. It's not my job to prove anything to the left, ever, anywhere, at any time. It's no conservative's job to prove anything to the left. They are the ones with spit on their chin. We are just hanging out. Don't forget that. Back in a minute. Okay, thank you very much. And Glenn Beck. See, I've been looking for, because I always talk about using Rush Limbaugh as an example of what it is that conservatives do wrong and how they approach life, culture, politics incorrectly, do things shallow, etc. And there's many other pundits that do the same thing. Sean Hannity, for instance, Hugh Hewitt, and Glenn Beck, just to name three others. So, but Rush Limbaugh is the only one that has his own app. Now I found that there's apps for Hugh Hewitt. There's also one for Glenn Beck and Sean Hannity as well. So, and in this particular case, Glenn Beck, he actually has a podcast listed. Hugh Hewitt, you can't listen to a podcast without paying him. Okay, Rush Limbaugh, the podcast is free. Well, no, it's not true. He charges as well. You can't listen to the entire show. You can listen to clips. Little clips of the show, but you can read the transcripts of the entire show, I do believe. And so you've at least got that. But Hugh Hewitt, again, you got to pay for it, and he gives you little clips and whatnot. So Glenn Beck actually has the podcast here. It seems to be free. At least they don't come up with the, hey, 99 cents for the first month. So it seems to be free. Anyways, what I'm going to do, play some of this Glenn Beck, and I believe it was from yesterday. It doesn't say. I was looking for the date on this. It doesn't say, but I'm assuming it was from yesterday. And I want to play a little bit of this and do a little critique at the end.
Caravan's not going to make it up to the United States. This is just nonsense. And why are they talking about it now? Really? So is the caravan a political message or a weapon? The 7,000 strong migrant caravan now appears to be both. We know that this migrant invasion force was organized in Honduras by the leftist political party looking to embarrass the current right-wing government. We know that. You're not going to hear that on television. You're not going to hear that from the leftist mainstream news. You won't hear it because that hurts their case. They want everybody to look like they're just weak and helpless and children. Making a 2,500-mile march? Wow, that seems pretty strong to me. This entire charade has been one giant political stunt. But the question on my mind is, who's paying for this? Moving 7,000 people is incredibly expensive and difficult. What about the people who can't make it to 25 miles or 2,500 miles? What about the people who might have heat stroke, might have an accident, break their leg, sprain their ankle? What happens to them? Is there any medical treatment? You would think that the left would be really intent on finding who's providing the water, who's providing the food. How are these people? You're not just going into a town with 7,500 people and everybody going to a restaurant. How are these people eating? Is there no heart on the left? Can somebody tell me? I'm concerned about their health. I'm concerned about their welfare. I'm concerned about their health care. How do you move 7,000 people and not have people starve? How do you move 7,000 people and not have people need water? Basic sanitary conditions. What is happening? How about the children? How about the babies that are in strollers? Are those strollers built for a 2,500-mile march? Shouldn't CNN be down there asking the questions, raising the money for better strollers? These poor children. Now, who could write this check? Who is writing the check for all of this? Well, I asked Governor Abbott about it yesterday in an interview. Who's funding all this? He hinted that the Trump administration was fully aware. Now, my question is, did Mike Pence let the cat out of the bag yesterday from the Oval Office? Mike Pence, our vice president, said, quote, "At the president's direction, I spoke to President Hernandez of Honduras. He told me that the caravan that is now making its way through Mexico, headed for our southern border, is organized by leftist organizations and financed by Venezuela." This isn't Donald Trump. This isn't Mike Pence. This is the president of Honduras. Now that puts this caravan into a completely different context, doesn't it? This caravan of poor migrant workers has suddenly become an invasion force financed by a radical revolutionary Marxist in the president of Venezuela. So it seems to be perhaps more than just a Honduran political message. This is a weaponized attack. But I know CNN doesn't want to cover that. Can you just please find out, do they have enough water? Who's bringing that water in? Can you please have some compassion and just find out who's feeding these people? Who's caring for their medical needs on a 2,500-mile journey? Can you please find that out for the love of humanity?
Okay, so there you go, a little bit of Glenn Beck, something different. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up on this that he inadvertently illustrated was nationalizing issues, nationalizing problems. Borders are completely a national issue anyways. You don't have to nationalize it. So, and that's basically what this is about. When you're looking at national races, and the only really national races you got is presidential. Okay, nobody else runs nationwide. It's statewide sometimes in the case of senators, but not nationwide. So the way it works is that the Republicans are the party of patriotism and the Democrats are the party of compassion. Usually the way that the race shapes up is that each side tries to bait the other into trying to prove that they are more patriotic or more compassionate than the other. So the Democrat tries to get the Republican to get into an argument or spat or fight or whatever about compassion. And the Republican tries to bait the Democrat to run his campaign based on patriotism. An example of that was George H.W. Bush. George the First is the way I like to call him. And he was going against Michael Dukakis. Well, Michael Dukakis, he was doing his thing about compassion, and George H.W. Bush was basically doing his patriotic stuff. So he does his deals about patriotism, and George Dukakis starts to get a little shaky, and he thinks, I got to prove myself as being patriotic. And I'm going to do that by showing that I'm going to be a great commander-in-chief. I'm going to do that by being pictured in some military hardware. So he got into some kind of, I'm not sure if it was a tank or a personnel carrier. And he was driving around in it. I don't know if he was actually steering it, but all you could see was his head sticking up out of this piece of machinery. And it looked rather comical. And as a matter of fact, it looked so comical that it really sank his presidential chances after that. He looked silly. And that's the whole idea, is that if you get the left to try to prove that, hey, I'm just as patriotic as the next guy. Here, watch me. I can wave the flag too. They look bad. They look silly. They look stupid. If the left can get the Republican to say, oh, wait a minute, I'm as compassionate as anybody else. I still love grandma. I still love the elderly. I still love the poor. They look silly. Okay, so that's what you have here as an issue. If you want to, you're going to politicize it. You're going to try and run on this issue about all these immigrants, not migrants, immigrants. Actually, they emigrated from El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, and now they have immigrated to Mexico and on their way to immigrate to the United States. All that shows respect for property. Migration doesn't. Migration is what animals do. So they are trying to immigrate to the United States, and simply put, the way to deal with this is, from a conservative and Republican standpoint, is patriotically. You wave the flag. What Glenn Beck was doing was talking about compassion. He was being sarcastic. He was mocking the news departments, who are left and Democrat supporting and have a tendency to be, and do shows that are about compassion. Okay, he is mocking them, but a better way I think that he could have approached this is patriotically. That this is unpatriotic, that it's an invasion, if you wish. It's not a violent but potentially violent. I think, by the way, there's people that are worried. Jay Sekulow. I listen to him in the evenings sometimes when the Dodgers aren't on or when the game is over. And I'll listen to a little bit of Jay Sekulow, and he's concerned about bringing the military to the border, because his question is, what are you going to do once you get the military there? You can't put guns on these people. You can't start shooting them up. That's absolute disaster. And I think he's got a point there. So the question is, what do? Do you just stand there and watch, like the Mexicans did, and watch these people tear down your border and just march through your country? Or I think what you can do is funnel them. If you got a large group of people and you want to make that large group, normally a large group of people would be an advantage. Let's say if you're looking at it from a battle standpoint. You have 10,000 people on one side and a few hundred on the other. What do? You're outnumbered 10-1. What are you going to do? Thermopylae is an example of that, where the Spartans were facing the Persians, who outnumbered them 20, 100-1, 1,000-1. But they fought them anyhow. There's only 300 of them, and again, unbelievable amounts of Persians. So what did they do? They made the Persians fight them in a very narrow space. It's a little tiny valley. The whole army isn't going to fit through there. So they have to make their army smaller to try to get through this wedge, and the 300 of them become a much more effective force. Funneling is what I call it. So you do the same thing with these immigrants. Is as they get to the United States, you funnel them to one particular point. Okay, how you would funnel them, I don't know. That's going to have to be up to the federal government to find a way to do that. But it is funnel them to one particular point and process them. Okay, they're all going to come and they're going to say, "I'm here seeking asylum." Okay, and you take them one by one. There's no reason for the United States to be in a hurry about this. We're in no particular hurry. What do we care how long it takes? We don't care if the process takes us, if you have 7,000, 10,000, 14,000 people, and you're doing them one at a time, maybe, I don't know, it might take years, decades, who knows? Okay? So if you take them one at a time, What do you think that the person that's 14,000th in line waiting to get to the border to seek asylum is going to do? Do you think they're going to stick around for months or years waiting to be processed? No. Remember, the last time this kind of thing happened, some months ago, 80% of those people were turned away. Okay? And the same thing can happen here. Now, 80% of them turned away. It may be also that a good number of those walked away on their own. They're not going to bother to go in and get processed. Because remember, what the left is trying to do here is agitate. They want to agitate and create social friction. Because in social friction, there's revolutionary potential. But that assumes that somebody overreacts. They want to be able, and I'm sure when they approach the border, they could do what they did with Mexico. All the men go to the back, and they bring all the women and children to the front. So, again, the idea, bait the United States into overreacting, responding in some kind of a violent way so that they can then use this as a political coup, for lack of a better term. So, and maybe even use that, and Democrats might be able to use it in the midterm elections. But like I said, I think funnel them into one particular point, take each refugee one by one. I don't think it's a good idea to go out and get extra. They did that last time. Well, let's have some more courts and some more, judges and whatnot so we can expedite the process. I say no. We're under no obligation. Just because they decide to bring 14,000 people to the border doesn't mean that the United States is obligated to accommodate them. Okay? We'll take our time. We'll do it one by one. If you don't like that, go home. Okay, back in a minute. Thank you very much. Welcome back. The Ayn Rand Lexicon. Love reading the Ayn Rand Lexicon. It reminds you of essences. It reminds you of the fact that concepts are real, they're important, and they need to be understood. Today's concept is compromise. A compromise is an adjustment of conflicting claims by mutual concessions. This means that both parties to a compromise have some valid claim and have value to offer each other. And this means that both parties agree upon some fundamental principle which serves as a basis for their deal. There can be no compromise on basic principles. There can be no compromise on moral issues. There can be no compromise on matters of knowledge, of truth, of rational conviction. It is only in regard to concretes or particulars implementing a mutually accepted basic principle that one may compromise. For instance, one may bargain with a buyer over the price one wants to receive for one's product and agree on a sum somewhere between one's demand and his offer. The mutually accepted basic principle, in such case, is the principle of trade, namely, that the buyer must pay the seller for his product. But if one wanted to be paid and the alleged buyer wanted to obtain one's product for nothing, no compromise, agreement, or discussion would be possible. Only the total surrender of one or the other. There can be no compromise between a property owner and a burglar. Offering the burglar a single teaspoon of one's silverware would not be a compromise, but a total surrender, the recognition of his right to one's property. Contrary to the fanatical belief of its advocates, compromise on basic principles does not satisfy but dissatisfies everybody. It does not lead to general fulfillment but to general frustration. Those who try to be all things to all men end up by not being anything to anyone. And more, the partial victory of an unjust claim encourages the claimant to try further. The partial defeat of a just claim discourages and paralyzes the victim. There are two sides to every issue. One side is right and the other is wrong, but the middle is always evil. The man who is wrong still retains some respect for truth, if only by accepting the responsibility of choice. But the man in the middle is the knave, who blanks out the truth in order to pretend that no choice or values exist, who is willing to sit out the course of any battle, willing to cash in on the blood of the innocent, or to crawl on his belly to the guilty, who dispenses justice by condemning both the robber and the robbed to jail, who solves conflicts by ordering the thinker and the fool to meet each other halfway. In any compromise between food and poison, it is only death that can win. In any compromise between good and evil, it is only evil that can profit. In that transfusion of blood which drains the good to feed the evil, the compromise is the transmitting rubber tube. When men reduce their virtues to the approximate, then evil acquires the force of an absolute. When loyalty to an unyielding purpose is dropped by the virtuous, it's picked up by scoundrels. When you get the indecent spectacle of a cringing, bargaining, traitorous good and a self-righteously uncompromising evil. The 3 rules listed below are by no means exhaustive. They are merely the first leads to the understanding of a vast subject. 1. In any conflict between 2 men or 2 groups who hold the same basic principles, it is the more consistent one who wins. 2. In any collaboration between 2 men or 2 groups who hold different basic principles, it is the more evil or irrational one who wins. 3. When opposite basic principles are clearly and openly defined, it works to the advantage of the rational side. When they are not clearly defined, but are hidden or evaded, it works to the advantage of the irrational side. So, again, this is great stuff on compromise, because you hear about it not so much anymore now. Things seem to be more in the area of absolutes, the left, but the left used to talk about that all the time. Compromise, compromise. You know, it's in Washington, you'd hear about that. Well, we need to be able to compromise. No, our constituents expect us to compromise. No, your constituents expect you to negotiate if possible, and to do so in good faith. But they do not expect you to compromise. Other than that, Ayn Rand has put it, as usual, excellently. Back in a minute. Okay, thank you very much. And we're back. And basically, I'm going to, at this particular point, call it a day, so to speak. And we reach the conclusion, therefore, of another episode of The Drill. And I thank you for listening. And until next time, have a great day.